welcome Somerville and also the world, because you're in for a wonderful, wonderful panel tonight, because we're going to dig deep, because this is about art as protest, and I am honored to be surrounded by artists in different fields. Let me back up a bit. My name is Janet Cormier. A lot of you have seen me on Art at Scat as the host. I'm also a painter, a writer, and anything else that doesn't make money but has to do with social activism. That's what you'll find me doing. And today, or this evening, I'm honored to be around my peers. Thank you very much for being here. The gentleman alone, dangerously positioned with all the women, is Afaa Weaver. He's an African-American, as you can tell, poet extraordinaire. He has been recognized. He's a really a center for activity. He looks shocked in shock and awe as I say this, but he's known in many poetry circles. He's received the Fulbright Award and also the National Endowment for the Arts. And he has, excuse me, many publications, and he also does readings, and his work is phenomenal. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Jenna.
And then we have Simone John, who is the co-director of Books of Hope, which does phenomenal work with our youth. And she's here, she works with young authors, she inspires. Your group does a lot with young people. And thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And then we have Zuri Ball, who is here she is a Prospect Hill Charter School senior who will be around for 3 more months and then she's leaving. She also is an advocate for social justice and a filmmaker. Thank you. And we have Melissa Alexis, who is a dancer, choreographer, facilitator, consultant, and with her, like all of us, there's no separation in the roles, right?
Sure.
So again, we're here, art as protest. And a lot of this, I want to say up front, we struggled with the name of the program because what really brought us together was the energy that went into Black Lives Matter. And then it was like, you don't want to co-opt the name, but you want to stand by the name, and we struggled with that. But what I've noticed is that we're all artists, and we've done something with our art to make statements about what's going on historically, and then when it came to, I guess, ground zero for Ferguson. So we are here to discuss a lot of different issues. One of the questions I'd like to pose to the panel is, how has Black Lives Matter impacted you as a movement with your art, with your writing, with the students that you work with your activism in dance? Anybody want to start?
I think I can say that, the way that everything that happened in Ferguson and some of the issues have impacted me and my co-director, the way that we run our program. As you said, there is no separation between our lives as activists and our lives as facilitators and co-directors. So part of what we've done is bring that into our program. So we've done workshops based around, Black Lives Matter's Visions for a New America, or based around their, the plan that they have for what they want to see, and asking and engaging our youth what they think about what's been going on and how that's impacting them. So it's really greatly informed the way that we've run our program so far.
And you have a lot of potential.
Absolutely.
You got a lot of, I've heard some of the poetry, and you have a phenomenal group of students, very dedicated, and they seem very focused on social justice issues. So that's our future.
Definitely.
That's our future. Anyone else want to?
I put new energy into launching a program called the Wisconsin Project, and collaborating with people in Kenosha, Wisconsin. It's an educational initiative based around a chapbook of historical poems. there's a real lack of knowledge about the depth and nuance of African American history. That's our ongoing problems. The more recent waves of immigrants from the continent, from the Caribbean, how that's impacted what we call an African American. And all of these issues come into play when we have something like Black Lives Matter or the Ferguson movement. And when I'm talking to my students about this, I try to give them a historical perspective. How have these things changed? It's different from the 1960s or the Harlem riots during World War II, going on each time it changes. And so I think it's important for me as an educator to help my students to understand the context of this and why it's different now and what it means.
The way Black Lives Matter has impacted me, it's forced me to bring activism to my school. And at my school, at least 60 to 80% of the kids look like me. And because of that, I really wanted to bring the movement to our school, to the administrators, to the board, and to the teachers. So when the Black Lives Matter came out, it was really a big push for me and a lot of my friends that I work with to really say we need to bring this to our school. We need to educate everybody around us about what's going on in Ferguson, what's going on in New York, and all over the world, and how it affects us, and how our actions and us as beings will survive in society today.
Mm-hmm. For me, I feel like Black Lives Matter has made the work that I was doing, particularly as an educator, just even more poignant. And especially through dance, already we were exploring how and why the movement of Black bodies matters, and how that's perceived. So I feel like it's an extension, of that, and again, even more poignant, even more important. To talk about why Black bodies matter. And then as an educator, bringing activism into the classroom. So really, a lot of the work that I was doing in Newark prior to getting here, before Ferguson happened, was around our environment matters. As an extension of our bodies, our external environment matters, and we matter in that environment. And so then when Ferguson happened and I had moved back here to Boston, to the Boston area, it just really solidifies that for me, because this is coming back home to a place where I feel like it is segregated, and in the arts, and particularly in dance, it's segregated. And so really looking at, how we can pull Black dance and the myriad of meanings, of what that is to the forefront.
I know as a painter, I use a lot of words because I'm also a writer and I love to talk. So what I did was I did a series of paintings, and one thing that struck me was Ferguson was the shot heard round the world. We think of the Boston Tea Party, but it really was, because whatever happens to Darren Wilson, the police officer accused of the death of Michael Brown, he was the one that opened that door. And I would imagine his police officers, his brothers and sisters in blue, should be outraged that he let out the secret, as quiet as it was kept, about the way things happened. And the other piece that I did was that Ferguson is not just a little, well, I always thought of it as a hick town. So if you're from Ferguson, I'm not sorry I said that. But it is a state of mind. It's history. It's the way people think. It's an agenda. And it just opened up a whole wave of emotion for me. And I was really shocked to hear, I lost a friend through Ferguson. Not that that person was there, but they couldn't get the protest. They couldn't see why Black people were angry. Because when you're white, your life matters. But if you're Black, it's, any person of color. You're just, you're not even second, you're third.
I think the biggest divide is the failure of imagination for Black pain, or the pain of people of African descent, and the failure of an awareness of the complexities and nuances surrounding that. I've heard all too often people refer to African Americans being too angry, and sometimes in conversation, well, I have a friend from Cameroon or a friend from Jamaica, they're not like you. Why are you so upset? And so I think there's a general lack of understanding in many areas of American society about the depth and the significance of black pain. And as a black man who's kind of big, I'm trying to lose weight, but I'm still big. But I've always lived with this. I've had my own experiences with police. I grew up in Baltimore. I lived in Baltimore for most of my life. I was 33 when I left. I'm 63 now. But I've had my times with policemen. And so it's nothing new to me. I'm sad or saddened by the fact that even middle-class blacks are out of touch with what working class and poor black people go through on a daily basis. And there needs to be some more communication within black culture about, especially since the civil rights movement has split the community. And there was a new middle class, and that took a hard hit during the mortgage crisis. And so there needs to be some discussion inside the group. We need healing inside the group. You know.
And with dance, do you see that as a way of healing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's always my mantra. Dance is healing. I think even when it's not positioned explicitly as such, I mean, that's been our history. That's been our legacy. That's been what we've done through the drum, through our bodies for centuries. And so even when we don't call it that, when we don't call it dance therapy, when we don't, I think that's what we're engaging in. And, you know, I certainly see that through my work as a dancer, just talking about one of my roles. I dance with Jean Apollon Expressions in Cambridge. And through that work, we have a premiere. I'll just shout it out since we're talking. We have a premiere coming up at Boston Center for the Arts, March 27th and 28th. And through that work, you know, Jean is really looking at healing a lot and discussing a lot of the things that go on in Haiti and that go on here around homophobia and, you know, racism and classism and, you know, tackling those issues. And we're dancing that. We're trying to embody that, you know, with each other. And that kind of work is healing, and also a dance class is healing, you know, moving together collectively to live music, you know, and being able to just, you know, work through emotion in a different way, in an embodied way. That's absolutely healing.
Zuri, amongst your peers, the pain that Afaa talked about, are they talking about it?
They're talking about it, they feel it. I think the biggest thing that made them realize awkward moment. I can't hear me. I think the biggest thing, I think the biggest event that made them realize what was going on was Eric Garner because of the video. And so in our classes, advisories and homerooms, and on our phones and whatnot, we would watch the video and we realized that, like, police officers, police brutality is real. People of color are being stopped and frisked for absolutely no reason, and that it's so real. We may not experience it in our daily lives, but it's happening to people that look just like us, to our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, whomever. And when we see the videos, when we hear when we read the articles, and we hear the reports, and we see the mugshots on the news, and we hear the stories, we're starting to internalize the fact that it could be us one day. Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, Eric Garner, all those people. That's my family right there. we may not have the same blood, but that's my family, because at the end of the day, we are in this together. In my school, they are my family as well. And so not only do I need to educate myself about what's going on in today's society, I need to educate everybody else. And I think that's everybody's here's job on stage, regardless if I'm an artist or not. Everybody in this room, everybody in America, if you have some sort of knowledge about what's going on today, you need to share it with somebody else. Either if they're ignorant or if they're scared. So that's what I personally think.
Okay. And with Books of Hope, and also with you as an artist also.
Well, something that I'm thinking about that came to mind based on a few comments that you made, you talking about the friend who you are no longer friends with based on this, and you talking about the inability, like the lack of imagination for some people to empathize with some of the Black experiences, and you talking about how part of what made this a big deal for you and people in your age group is being able to see it. And I think that is really important, and I think part of people's inability to access these experiences comes from them not being shown usually on the media. You're not talking, there's not a dynamic depiction of Black people on the news. You can watch a Woody Allen movie set in New York that has no Black people like in line at the grocery store. There are very kind of slim avenues for Black people to be portrayed. So it's difficult for a white person to understand where a Black friend might be coming from if they have no interaction with that. And so part of seeing it and having somebody film it on a phone camera and having it proliferate all types of media, it makes it accessible in a way that reminds me of my father talking about what it was like to watch body bags, you know, in Vietnam, and to kind of have that televised in that way. I think it's simultaneously bringing a lot of people to consciousness and a lot of young people, and but still there are people who, due to their experiences, like have trouble accessing that. And the work, I feel like this is a young person's movement in a lot of ways. Part of what we're doing at Books of Hope, we've had youth activists who are organizing, some from Prospect Hill, come and talk to our kids, and do workshops and talks about different ways that they can mobilize and how they can turn what they're experiencing into action and have a voice. As young people, they can't vote. Sometimes I feel like in the adult world or in some circles, that's your means of participating in your democracy, or you vote, and they don't even have that. So it's been really great and really good for my personal practice to engage with other young people and see how they're kind of navigating this as well.
Well, I thought one of the interesting things, as a side note, in New Rochelle recently, there were some young brothers, and for people that don't know what that is, that means young Black men. If you don't have any Black friends, that may be a new word for you. But they had snowball fight, and the police drew their guns. And obviously one of the police officers must have watched way too many action flicks from the 80s and 90s, because he drew his gun and he was like, you better, and all of that with his language. And it was snowballs. That was it. It was snowballs, and it makes you wonder. And sometimes I want to throw this out, that media, we're not seen. If someone from space came to see us, they would not know that Black people were alive on any of the TV shows or anything. And we get stereotyped. Usually now we've moved up, so we're now coroners in a lot of the crime dramas and stuff. But that's just about it. You don't see us as, Halle Berry, okay, as an astronaut. But I mean, the reality is, and I thought I just have to say, they pick a Black woman to be an astronaut. So we know that's not going to happen. But the really crazy thing is, her name is Molly. There are no Black people, or very few Black people named Molly. So you try to distance that so far away from us. But there are no images of us. And the history is so painful, and there's so much shame and ignorance in the way we have been treated.
And guilt.
People don't want to deal with it. The other side of that, we don't treat ourselves well. I hear the N-word way too much. And I have issue with it. And I did a painting, and I said, you could say it, nigger is, never is God given enough respect. And that's what it is. When we call ourselves that, we give permission. And believe me, people will take that permission. So, I'm trying to throw in, like, there are all these things I want, Afaa, when you said about the pain, how are we dealing with the pain? Are we verbally abusing ourselves?
I think, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Books of Hope, because I know Sol Brown, and the mentoring process that she instituted is just remarkable. The evidence is here. But also, it is a young person's movement, and people in my age category, I think, would benefit by understanding the impact of technology on that. When I was 25 years old, 1974 or 75, there were no cell phones. There was no such thing as email. There were no flash mobs. You couldn't do that kind of thing. You couldn't organize. You couldn't tweet something if you saw it. in our generation, we have the benefit of perspective and having lived through certain things, so we can provide that. But I'm actually very happy to see that there are no appointed leaders. I mean, this is something that's not leadership oriented in terms of like having one person be the representative. I think that's good because a groundswell of opinion comes through the movement and people emerge in certain ways, but they aren't designated. Once they become designated, we fall into the trap that's been set up for generations and generations and generations and still end up in the same place. Having said that, I think also the issue of violence is one that's both internal and external. And after Michael Brown was killed, or murdered, I should say, there were about 60 murders, 60-some murders in the communities of color in the St. Louis area. So then these things are connected. The murder rate in Baltimore began to spiral in the 1970s, right after the 1960s. So by 1982, we had approximately 250 murders a year, most of which were black men killing black men. And it hasn't gotten better.
But then it's the way they're treated. It's the way those crimes are treated.
It's connected.
Because we're not, if it's us, it doesn't happen. I have this thing where I say, if you're white and you're murdered, you can be a cold case. But if you're a person of color, you're going to be a case frozen in time.
In Baltimore, there was a lawyer who serviced the black community, made it clear. This was my father's generation. He said, you kill someone as black, I can get you out of it. You kill a white person, I can't help you. And that's the way it is, not just in Baltimore, but around the country. So that's written into the consciousness of the country, the value of the black body, or the lack of value of the black body.
I think I completely agree with that. There is this message that black life is somehow expendable, and I think that young black people know that to an extent, which is why they're being riled up by what's going on. It's why that's why black on black crime is unique in a way. I feel like it's not unique in the way that sometimes people talk, like inter-community crime is common, white on white crime is also very common. It's just not called that, it's just called crime, Whereas black on black crime I feel like has a special connotation of like the community has all of these problems, and I feel like it's sometimes used in a negative way. But the fact of the matter is, black on black crime, what makes it unique is that there is a nuance there of understanding that a black person knows that they can kill a black person and get away with it too. That's true, but they also know that their life isn't valued in a larger context. I think there's a struggle that happens there that is played out in our communities when there is gang violence or when things like this happen. You're struggling to hold both of these ideas in your head at the same time, that you know that you can kill a black person and maybe get away with it or not have to pay for it in a criminal justice sense, but you also know that anybody could kill you and you could be just as dead and no one will care. And what is that? How do you put language to that, and how do you embody that, and how do you move forward in spite of that?
I agree with everything you guys are saying, especially as a young person in this community and in this time. I totally agree with that. I also like to go back to your point of talking about the media and how people of color are portrayed. For example, if a white person were to commit, let's say, mass murder inside of a school, it's a deranged teen with mental problems killed a whole bunch of schools because he has problems with his mom. But if a black person shoots a person of color or shoots anybody, this angry black teen shot somebody with no reasoning, and you're just kind of like, this is mass. I'm not saying that murder is all right, but I'm saying a mass murder shooter, he's just crazy. But then when a black person kills another black person or whomever, they have anger issues, and you see their face, and it's just a disgusting mugshot, and that's all you get thrown around. And then when it's a white person, it's just kind of like this teen. And then the newscasters, the way they say it, they always have to emphasize the fact that we're people of color, like this black teen, this Latino teen, or whatever. But this teenager, he had issues with his mom. There was a gun in the house. We don't really know how he got it. And it's just kind of like, is this what we really are as a teen? And my friends were looking in the news like, Are you kidding me? He wasn't crazy. He just had problems. He was just angry, just like we would be angry as well. But it's just the way the media portrays us. I'm not even surprised. It goes all the way far back, hundreds of years ago, with propaganda. We're monsters. We're beasts. That's what we are to people, and that's how they're gonna continue to portray us. And a final example before I pass it on: LeBron James. He did a sports magazine, and so in propaganda, there is a black man like drawn as a beast, as a monkey, and he had a little white girl in like a green dress carrying her. This was back in like 1900s and stuff. But now LeBron James is holding a white lady in the exact same kind of green dress, but with a basketball. And he's getting money for this, and he thinks, oh, yeah, look at me. Okay, I'm this big guy on top. I'm like, you are the same dude that they had 100 of years ago in the chains. The only chains that you have on your wrist are the basketball NBA rings that y'all got. And it's just kind of like, all right, kid, bet. This is what I'm for.
It's perfect that you spoke, because I'll address both. I mean, again, working in Newark, I'm taking myself out of this context a little because, I'm transitioning back here, but it was striking to me to be told that one of the administrators of the school where I was working did have some fear coming into that community, into the school. She was a white administrator. And I was thinking about exactly what you were talking about all the mass murders. Newtown happened while I was there, all these things that happened. And I said, frankly, I'm more scared of a teenage white boy. I'm more scared of that demographic in schools than, black teens in schools. There isn't the same entitlement. I'll just put it plainly. There isn't that entitlement that you can have that problem and take everybody with you. Do fights happen? Yes. Are kids going at each other? Yes. That happens. But it is that black fear, that leads people to say, I'm more scared of this, environment. And then talking about environment and the idea of knowing my life doesn't matter as much. All you have to do as a youth is look around. What does your school look like in an all-black community? I knew what my school looked like. It wasn't so great, and that was after Facebook gave millions of dollars for Newark school improvement, and it didn't happen. It didn't go into those buildings. So all you have to do is really look around where you're coming every day, where you walk every day, to make that conclusion. Like, nobody cares,
And when you're talking about anger, and I think of the model that came out when you had white men shooting up their workplaces, and it's called the Avenging White Male. And it came out of Northeastern University. And it was usually a 30 or 40-year-old male who, ironically, was responding because people he didn't think should be in a position he should have had. So there were black people and candidates who were getting a job he should have had. There was even a white woman that had a job that he should have had. And so how the media twists things and turns them to explain our pain I always think it's just phenomenal. Like, am I the only one with glasses on in the room? Actually, as I look around, I'm the only one. Yeah, but anyway, that's the way it feels, though. I mean, we're letting people express our pain and letting them, or there are so many of them, holding the camera and directing it in a certain way and editing a certain way.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
No, it's embedded in the American consciousness. I mean, when President Obama won the first election, he was the first president that I remember had the pleasure of having previous presidents call him and give him advice on how to do his job. When you look at racial violence and racial strife, the configuration very often between the men is an issue that's very similar to what you'll find in times of war. So white men very often will feel like they're entitled to leadership positions. And if I had an appropriate amount of money for each time I've been doubted, no matter my resume, or how many times I've made space in a room when I walk into it, I'd have a healthy retirement fund right now. But, I live with that. And so constantly doubted, and then constantly perceived as a threat, especially being big. And so I had to learn how to make myself safe by disarming people rather than letting things escalate to a point where they become extremely dangerous. And I've been physically threatened here in the Boston area on the subway, at Logan Airport, in the shuttle bus, going to the terminal.
And the thing is, Darren Wilson said he was accosted by this huge man. There were 2 inches in difference in height. That was it. That I don't see that. But it's always that we're bigger than life. But at the same time, we're able to be squished historically, and our story's not told. And that's what scares me about the media. Is
We get squished and then we get portrayed as King Kong. King Kong is a perfect paradigm for studying race relations in America. This gigantic ape and a beautiful, quote-unquote, white woman. It's a perfect model for looking at race relations in America.
and even the movies, like I'm going back some, Mandingo. That was a movie everybody's got to check out, because that's like that's the ultimate fear on race. But Melvin Van Peebles did a great movie called 3 Day Pass, and he actually showed a brother with a white woman in France, and they would finally get together, they're in bed together, and they each have their fantasies. He wants to be her white knight, as it were, on horse. She wants to be ravished by the savages. And it's amazing what he said then. And this brings us back to the art. What statements do we make? What do we do? What words do we choose?
Well, I was going to jump in and just say this reminds me of, just historically how the stories about Africa have been told by non-Africans. And so, what you said about, sort of taking back the lens, being able to tell our own stories, I think that's the importance of making art that reflects these times, that reflects Black Lives Matter, that reflects everything that about, the various aspects about Black pain. I think it's really important. I mean, I think one of the questions is it every artist's responsibility? I'm not sure I'm going to answer that, but I think being able to take back that lens is critical.
I totally agree with that. As you said earlier, I'm a filmmaker. So for my gender studies project, I made a film where I actually organized with a few of my classmates a school walkout. And so at least 100, 150 of everybody in the entire high school left the building, and we went to Boston. We met up with 3 or 4 other high schools in the area. We had 200 to 300 people marching around in Boston and protesting, and it was an awesome event. And so I kind of took the pictures and I put it in a video. And today, actually, I had a performance at my school. So my school is majority of color, and the administration, the teachers, and the upper administration and the board are majority white. And so my good friend and my fellow activist and we had a spoken word poem where we called out everybody in that group. And when I asked the teachers, I said, how did you feel about it? They said, I felt a little attacked. I was questioning, did I really do this? And I was just like, you guys really do this. One of our main points was white professionalism, because they come to school and they look professional, but when I wear something that's considered professional, they go, you can't wear that, it's too tight. I'm like, is it because of my body? And blatantly it is. My director / principal, she's a white woman, she'll wear a shorter skirt, and that's a lot tighter than mine, and she won't get anything for it. But if I do, or if any of my fellow female friends do, we'll get something for it. And then when I talk about race, my friends, they go, why you keep talking about race? I'm like, because you guys, it's us. And my teachers, my white teachers, oh, let's talk about it. And I'm like, you guys can't say we understand or let's talk about it more, because I really want to learn, because at the end of the day, you will never understand what it truly feels like to be screwed, because you can still leave this building with that white privilege, and it's just kind of like, my friends and I thank you, the Books of Hope for PHA, like that's super awesome. But everybody here, I feel like it's really important to, if you have a friend that's not of color, just to educate them a little bit, and to just everything that's been going on, everything we're talking about media, if they go, oh my gosh, that Black guy probably did it, just be like, what about that mass shooter over there who has a problem with his mom? You just gotta bring it back to them and like be honest and be blunt, because that's what I decided I have to do that now. Sometimes I used to just be quiet about it, but now I gotta be honest, because the more honest I am, the more they can like somewhat see the reality that we live in as like a whole, as like a family. You feel me?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like art has the potential, like people of color and artists of color have the potential to humanize how other people perceive people of color using their art. I was thinking about what you said about being perceived as a threat, and also about what Zuri said about the way that the news puts, like which pictures they put on the news for which murderers, which killers. And something that came up in one of the workshops we did some media literacy where we had the youth go to the computer lab to look up different things about different young people of color that had been murdered. And they came back to the table and they were saying, well, talking about the images that were used, they used a picture of Mike Brown on Facebook pretending to be hard because he's a young man, and you know they like to have this air of bravado, and that's the picture that's shown on the news. And how does that make him seem to the people that are watching? You know, that picture of him looking like an older black man, or looking like a big black man, as opposed to a picture of a white, you know, serial killer or somebody who bombed something, and it's like their headshot from when
Did you see
like hitting a tree or something?
Did you see the photo campaign? So there was a photo campaign about that, where youth now dressed up as how they would be portrayed. You know, if I died tomorrow, here's how they would show me, and so young black males would throw on their hoodie and make those gang signs and whatever, and other people who didn't look like that would look a different way. So there was this whole photo campaign around that.
I mean, it's really important. I think that when I think about the way that activists were being trained for nonviolent and creative direct action on Martin Luther King's Day, and Martin Luther King would tell them to wear your Sunday best, because that image, the image of a bunch of black people dressed to the nines, getting hoses turned on them, that is something that kind of pokes at the conscience of the people that are watching. Whereas an image of a kid from Facebook, you pulled his profile picture, it's a lot easier to discredit that person's experience and discount their life.
It was the same with the Nation of Islam when I was young. And they still wear a suit and tie. And
The fruit of Islam.
when I was younger, it was a bow tie. Always had a haircut, were always clean shaven.
And it throws people.
It throws a lot of people.
When you can say hello to someone, white folks think I don't know what they were expecting, but they used to do the handshake and everything, and it's like, I don't do that. I'm not that coordinated, and they just expect all this. But did you all see the story in, I think it was South Florida, where the police were using mugshots for target practice of black men? And how does that happen? I mean,
I think the other complicating piece of that was that the relative, a woman who was also a military person, who saw I believe her brother's photo being used. And here she's serving the country, quote unquote.
Well, it was the National Guard who outed them, because the National Guard found the photos and brought it, from what I understand, to the press. But then it's not just South Florida.
No.
It's like everywhere. There are these photos.
There's a real drain on your energy. I'm speaking personally. I mean, artists do have a responsibility, I think, as much as they can perceive that. But there's a real drain personally to having to confront these things on a daily basis. It takes something out of you, And for me I was in a hotel lobby 2 months ago, and there was something wrong with the circuitry, and the fire department came in, and the policeman came in. I'm on the other side of the lobby, and automatically he eyes me. And I'm standing here with professional people. Why am I getting the Zoom?
Well, I remember when when our president was in the process when they do that ceremony to bring him in. Tom Brokaw was really funny, because he goes, well, here's this man it's very important for people of, and he couldn't get it right. And then the same thing with Lindsay Lohan. She called Barack a nice colored guy, or she referred, you mean the colored guy? I mean, and she's Lindsay Lohan. I mean, if nothing else, not that I respect her, but I mean, she's hipster girl for Lindsay Lohan. She's white, she's hip, and well, she thinks she's hip, and she does her drugs and everything else, and she gets away with it, and she can't even. You would think if you were that hip and white, that you would at least know black. You know, you wouldn't say the colored guy. So, which proves that white drug culture is not that hip, I guess. But they just, I just couldn't get over that they do that. And Joe Biden even said, you know, Barack is a very neat, clean young man.
It's pervasive, and I just want to say also we have to look at how these issues intersect with Asian people, with Latino people, and in the Latino community we have the issue of color. We should just put that out there, you know, say that, because if you count all black people, there are more of us if you count black Hispanics, so sometimes they don't want to be counted that way. But then, and as well as, well, we need to just understand that this affects a lot of people. There's an intersectionality.
Yes.
Is it Pasa, or I can't think of the town where they've had their Ferguson, where there's where a man, in Arizona, where a Latino man was throwing something at police. He threw rocks, and they responded by shooting him down, which a lot of times reminds me of what we used to see for Palestine. You know, where there are people with sticks throwing sticks. I'm not taking a place in terms of Jewish question or anything like that. I'm just saying there are people who are fighting with sticks and stones, and then there are people who are shooting. And in Ferguson, they brought out, they didn't even know they had that kind of hardware. You know, they had like major weapons of mass destruction.
SWAT stuff, rolling in with tanks, like what is this, B?
In the black community, at least in Baltimore and Philly, we know that what they have, and they know what the black community has. And as I said, growing up in Baltimore, I was used to these protracted struggles between the community. It was an ongoing battle. And you know, black community members would kill policemen would come back and forth. I mean, that's my experience. And so Ferguson is not new, but it just shows me what I've lived as I get exposed to the rest of the world.
But Ferguson made it international.
Exactly.
And that's what's so phenomenal. It brought it, and it reminds me, and for those of you that are not familiar, the work of Frantz Fanon, who wrote about colonialism and the models, and a lot of that information could be used in the way the United States even deals with terrorists outside, because he deals with what is colonization, and that's what we are looking at. We're second class, and we're colonized. And I just want to say too that the thing that makes it so tiring as an artist is you never know when it's going to hit you. You're standing there with a cup of coffee and someone throws change in your coffee. They think they're helping you. Or they make a comment about, like I've gotten people sit next to me and go, who's white in your family? And sometimes just to upset them, I say Marilyn Monroe, just so that would just make them crazy, because that means she's sort of black, and that would just throw them all off. But people ask these inappropriate questions.
You know, to continue Frantz Fanon just a little bit, the state of psychoanalytic research that's going on now is inspiring, and put it that way, because research is being done into the psychoanalysis of race and racism, and the study of language, for example. The problems we're discussing are embedded in our language. You know, they're embedded in consciousness. The values that are attached to certain words and how those words are used in structure in society. So there are people working on that, you know, and so that's really necessary.
And it is with the language that, you know, how we present ourselves. It's the body language.
Yes, I was just
It's the written word.
to that.
It's the non-written word that just comes out. It's there. I did want to ask you all about collaboration. I thought this was fascinating. When Billie Holiday sang Strange Fruit, I remember hearing all the hoopla that it was a Jewish immigrant who wrote the song. What I didn't know until recently was that he was one of, now what is the couple, oh God, now I'm forgetting. The couple that was executed for their their alleged connection to communist.
Rosenbergs.
He was the son of the Rosenbergs,
Mhm.
and I didn't know that they had
It was
changed.
Ethel and Julius Rosenberg.
And he was
yeah.
adopted by their friends and shielded, but he wrote that. And who knew? That's a collaboration. Billie Holiday, I mean, she took her life in her hands, and so did he. Are you seeing collaborations? Are you looking for collaborations with people? Are they approaching you? Or do we collaborate with each other?
The Wisconsin project is a collaboration. The folks in Kenosha are white, and some of them are politically conservative. And that's the whole point, to try to bring people together to the table to look at the history of black people and how it bears on what's happening today. So I see that.
I think this doesn't necessarily pertain to art or my practice, but as far as Black Lives Matter and collaborations, I feel like one thing that's been unique about this is how it is starting to reach out into other social justice areas, the way that Black Lives Matter is a homelessness issue.
Yeah.
It's an issue with the prison industrial complex. And I feel like I've also seen some things about it being an environmental issue. It's a reproductive issue that our black kids are being hunted by police. And I think that's an interesting collaboration that people who might in other times have not thought that their cause of choice is necessarily related to the struggle of people of color are starting to realize that it's interconnected and that it's all part of the same system of oppression.
I totally agree with the Black Lives Matter. When I was in a lot of protests, they were there, and there were college students, and they reached out to high school students. And I personally would think, all these high school students, man, they don't know what's going on, they don't really care, but they reach out to us, and it was like the old and the young, and we had a pastor come through, we had older
Okay, be
people
careful on the older part, okay?
we had
She just went over too many olders, if you know what I mean.
we had older people walk in our protests with us, randomly join us, people of all races, and it was beautiful. And about the collaboration, this is, I think, about the 60s, the 50s, 60s, 70s, around that time when women were starting to, the women's movement, and their sexuality was starting to be more open, and women in the workforce, and how that was, it was parallel to the times of the civil rights movement. And so although they were two separate issues, they both had a main problem. That's what the government was like showing and permitting, and allowing for people like the American citizens to do. And they came together. It may not have been super obvious, but we were like, we both got to reach this goal. Even though it happened back then, it's happening now too. All the issues of LGBTQ, having to do with environmental problems, homelessness, Black Lives Matter, all those things, they all work together because we have a simple goal, and that's to make the human rights somewhat equal, or at least more together.
And I think this goes back to the intersectionality. We can't ignore that it all overlaps and impacts. And I think that's why Ferguson took, this and us and this issue to the world stage, because everybody across the world who is colonized, who has experienced oppression, can relate to either an economic struggle, an environmental struggle, military intervention, and the impact on civilians. So there's so many layers of issues, and within the dance field, I see a lot of collaboration among dancers, among choreographers. I see always with musicians. I would love to see more, collaboration with writers. I dream of collaboration all the time. I've collaborated with people who build gardens, because I think, showing and bringing, natural foods back to our community is important. That's the other end, or the other side of the coin for me, of the energy output is energy input. So all sorts of interdisciplinary and intersectional collaborations, I think the time is ripe for that.
And when I see Ferguson too, and I think of the male dynamic, I think, and this is something that's never been brought up before, during slavery, we know there was rape against women, but no one ever talks about male-on-male rape and what happened between white men and black men. And when I look at black men being victimized, it just brings a very powerful scenario into my head. Like, we don't address a lot of these issues.
In segregation, there was an inside rule of not hanging out dirty laundry. And I'm from a generation where black people didn't think that black people had mental illness. You know, we don't go crazy,
still
we
there,
don't
yeah.
abuse children, you know. These things, men who wanted to have relationships with men were always on the down low because it was not accepted any other way. But I think that does need to be talked about, and also the evidence of that in slavery is being uncovered now.
Well, now we've opened up a door, but we're going to leave it to the audience because our time is up. And I want to thank everyone who was here tonight, anyone who was listening, people in our audience, SCAT for being brave and bringing this up. Because we talked about a lot of different issues, and we are artists, and our lives matter, and your lives matter, and Black lives matter. So I thank you all, and you can find our folks here, you can find them through SCAT, and as I end my shows everywhere, Assalamu alaikum, which
Walaikum
thank
salam.
you, peace be to you, all of you, I don't care what color you are. Thank you.